Hello and welcome to the Car Care channel, and welcome back to the most neglected car that I own, that is my fault series. This is the 3UZ FE engine out of the Atlas 430 that I own for over a year, that I just, In today's video, we're going to assemble this engine. First, we got to spend a lot of time cleaning it. We got everything assembled, we got everything ready to go. The goal is, and I hold that goal extremely loosely, we're going to have this engine fully assembled and hopefully ready to go back in the car. Then we will turn our attention to the next disaster, which we discovered last episode, which is the transmission, which decided to have an event, a thermal event. The torque converter is blue. Cross that bridge when we get to it. So, we're going to start assembling this engine, put you guys on a time lapse, talk about it as we go, and we'll go from there. Let's start with the longest video in the history of our channel. I'll tell you why later on, by talking about one of the most common problems that we're seeing with the UZ series engine, the oil pump leak. This is what you're seeing being removed right now, is the oil pump. Unfortunately, you cannot remove this oil pump without pulling the upper oil pan, which in most cars is a pretty complicated proposition. 100 series, for example, Land Cruiser with the 4.7, the 2UZ, you almost have to remove the engine out of the car, which that makes it actually easier. This is a very, very common thing with these. And usually what leaks on them is not really the sealer, it's the O-ring, which if you wait a moment here, here's that O-ring and how that looks like. Yep, that was completely cracked in half and it was leaking everywhere. This was one of the very rare terrible designs in this engine, where they put an O-ring to seal an oil galley. Bad idea, but this is one of the common problems, and unfortunately you have to almost pull the engine out of the car, pull the upper oil pan, then you're able to pull the timing belt and all that stuff, and then pull the oil pump. So having said that, this has been, as I am filming this voiceover, let's just be honest, this was so long ago that I don't even remember the events leading up to this point. And to be precise, we are now in December, which we are approaching Christmas. Merry Christmas. We filmed this video in June. Yes, it has been that long, and I have not forgotten about this series. This car, I'm just going to give you a small sneak peek for the future. I am daily driving this car right now. I think you will be very happy with the results, how this turned out, and a complete and absolute change of plans for this car, which we're going to get to in later episodes. But for now, let's talk about the engine. So right here, we're basically starting assembly. I did not do anything with the short block. This engine did not burn oil, did not have any other issues. We were basically kind of future-proofing it for leaks, taking care of the valve guide seals, we're going to get to in a moment here. But cleaning sealer, we talked about this a lot. Prep is everything. Get all the loose pieces, get some Scotch-Brite, clean the surface really well, make sure it's oil free, make sure you do not have any type of contamination. So something I skipped over in this part, which I didn't film, the rear main seal. We pulled it, has another O-ring, that's another one of it's the same galley actually that it blocks, that the oil pump does. So we did the rear main seal, resealed the plate. It was just a little difficult to film it because it was against the engine stand. I didn't want to take the block out of the engine stand to do that. So we did that off camera. I'm just saying that in case you don't see it here and you wonder if we ever did it. Of course we did. That's one of the very common spots to leak on this engine as well. So let's briefly talk about why this is the longest video in the history of our channel. Folks, the shop is extremely busy lately. Here's that oil pump going back, by the way. Shop is extremely busy lately, and because of the change of plans of this car, it gave me until basically December 17th to finish this car, and that's why it is finished already, and I'll tell you why in a later episode. But the shop's so busy, we were barely working on this engine and barely getting things done. And of course, customer cars versus my own car, you know which one takes priority. So this one got pushed to the side, It actually sat under cover of the block bare for months until we actually got to it. But everything was going well, and if you're a regular in my channel, there's a blue toolbox that's long gone now, but that's how old this video is. But assembling this engine and working this engine is such a pleasure. It is a beautiful engine to work on. Now, some of these parts, you notice they have some staining. That is pretty typical, folks. This engine has it around 165,000 miles. So we tried to clean some of it, but some parts turned out great. Some parts not kind of aesthetically pleasing, but I'm not looking for aesthetically pleasing. I want things to work and work well for a very long time, because of the change of plans for this car. So here we're installing the upper oil pan. This is the part that is very difficult to remove in the car because you have the subframe in the way. And subframe we can work with, but in the case of trucks, the frame is in the way. So you really cannot pull this upper oil pan, like say on a 100 series Land Cruiser. It's extremely difficult, near impossible to pull it without, you can pull it, you can always find a way, but how do you install it with sealer and you're trying to line it up and not smear that sealer anywhere? That's where this becomes difficult. And we're starting to see a lot of these oil pumps leak. They manifest themselves initially as a crank seal leak, but once you pull everything apart, well, the crank seal is dry, but everything around it is covered with oil. That's the oil pump. It leaks on top, then it goes around the oil pump, like the timing belt area, and it leaks at the very bottom. And that's, unfortunately, that's becoming somewhat of a common problem simply because these engines are old. Here we are diving into the main thing, the cylinder head. So this particular car, when you leave it sit overnight and you start it, there's a giant puff of blue smoke. Folks, that is valve guide seals. So what happens with the valve guide seals is you're driving the car, everything is good. You let it sit overnight, the valve guide seal keeps the oil that is on top of the cylinder head, lubricating the camshaft and the springs and everything else. That oil kind of settles and sits on top. At the bottom of that is where the combustion chamber is. So where the stem of the valve is, there's a seal that keeps the oil from going in. Well, if that seal is worn, when the engine sits, that oil kind of seeps past the valve and goes down on top of the valve. And as soon as you start the car, you have all this oil coming down that has been sitting, and it burns off. Then after a while, it stops. That is a classic sign of a valve guide seal. Now, there are other reasons why engines would do that, but that's the most common one with age. So yeah, there are ways to do it in the car. You can, take the camshafts out, which in the case of the UZ, it's actually not super difficult. You pull the timing belt, pull the valve covers, and then you can pull the cams out in the car. You don't have to remove it. You can pressurize the cylinder, put the piston all the way up, pressurize the cylinder, it'll push the valves up, and then you can take the springs and change the seal and reinstall it. But in this case, this engine also had an oil pump leak. That's why I didn't do it in the car, and I decided, you know what, let's pull the engine out, let's tear it completely down, replace every single gasket, address every single common problem, give it kind of a midlife refresh, if you would, and not have any issues with it, because I intend for this car, unlike the 600,000 mile one, which it had an original plan, that plan changed. Now it became kind of a project for life for me, where this is a car I'll never sell. I'll just keep driving and driving and driving. This one, however, it has a different purpose, which we'll talk about in a different episode. But here we just removed the valve guide seals. We installed the new ones, both sides. So we did this on both cylinder heads. That's pretty typical here. We're just making sure that the seals are seated properly. So the tool that I'm using is made by a company called Lyle. You can use that big C-clamp to compress the springs and put the keepers and all that. I've never liked that one, honestly. Some folks, that's the only tool they'll use, and that's perfectly fine. So here we're getting ready. Something about the UZ series engine that you need to know about, you got to be very careful with the head gaskets when you install them, because they are directional, but you can't easily tell. Like one side cylinder head will sit, or head gasket will sit on either side, but if you don't pay attention, there's a couple oil holes that get blocked or not blocked on either side. So if you don't pay attention, you could install them backwards, and it kind of causes a disaster. So they are clearly labeled left and right, and that's how you tell. They have a stamp in them. So that's something you need to be aware of. The torque is pretty high on these. It's a So you torque it to a specific spec and then 90 degrees in a specific pattern. That because the head bolts are stretch bolts. In this particular case, I didn't replace the head bolts. We didn't have any thermal event on this engine or anything, so I didn't see the need to. We are good. Over here, when installing the buckets, the shims and the buckets, this engine does not have like hydraulic lifters or any of that. It's just manual valve adjustment. At some point, we tested the valve clearance. It was right within spec. Rarely does this engine has like valve clearance issues. Usually, I mean, my 600,000 mile ones, it was perfectly fine. Then we get to the biggest disaster with the UZ series engine, the cam seal. So on the VVTi versions of this engine, this is what you have to do. You have to pull the camshaft out of the car, disassemble it to get to the cam seal, which you see it sitting right there. We're about to pull it out. Not the best design in the world. I feel like the 2JZ had a much better design, had a similar style VVTi gear. This is the early VVTi days, but that's how they did it. And unfortunately, super high labor to replace the cam seals. But the good thing is they're actually not super common to leak. You know what's more common to leak on the UZ than the cam seals? The cam caps, which have sealer on the edges, a little bit of sealer in the middle. That's usually what leaks on these, not really the cam seal itself. Truth have to be said, that's what we usually see. I do wish that the UZ series engine had a similar style to like the 2JZ, but yeah, that's what we have. It's not the problem. So something about installing the cams and the cam caps on a UZ is something, if you're ever working on one of these engines, I want to say this is a super DIY job. You got to be very careful. I have seen so many UZ engines get destroyed in this particular part right here, what we're doing, because the cams don't sit. You see how I keep taking them out and putting them back? You gotta make sure they sit fully in the journals, because if you don't and you crank the caps down, you could actually mar the surface or crack the cap. You gotta be very, very careful. This is that cap, by the way, which has that VVTi filter. This is the cap that loves to leak. There's also that full moon, not half moon, that also loves to leak on these. That's actually leaks more than the cam seal itself, but that's the cap that usually causes a leak. But if you got to a point to remove that cap, just remove the cam seal and replace it. At that point, you're so close. But another thing with the UZ series engine that is very, very strange. The sequence of how you tighten the bolts on the cams is nothing like any other engine I've ever seen. It's a very strange procedure, and you got to make sure these cams sit, folks. We have seen this where this cam gets destroyed from the first start or breaks in half when you don't sit it right. It just gets to an angle where it jams. And yes, if you don't turn it at some point, you find out that it's locked up, you will destroy that engine very quickly. This is one of those parts on the UZ, you gotta be very careful. And the other thing is, this is similar with a lot of engines in that time period. The exhaust gear has like a damper on it, so you gotta lock that damper. Otherwise, it'll come apart and it'll be quite a job to reset it back, because it's spring loaded. You have to kind of wind it back. They tell you how to wind it back in their repair manual, but they also tell you try not to do that. It's best to just lock it. So you just put a bolt in, and like an M6x1, it locks it in place and we're good. So here we're talking the caps. If you're familiar with engine work, that's a very strange sequence to torque these caps. It just doesn't even make sense. That's how the manual tells you to do it. So well, you follow the manual. This is that bolt that I just removed. That was the bolt I was telling you about. So I decided to finish one side complete, like put the valve cover, put everything, even the ignition coils. Got carried away there. I figured let's close the engine slowly. So whenever you work on an engine, this is something I'll share with you. Your goal, before you start attaching external stuff, close your engine. Close the valve cover, close everything else, keep the internals protected before you move to external stuff. Give that valve cover a good clean, although this valve cover is not super dirty. And here's another thing that's very important. The spark plug tube seals, always replace them. These were basically rocks that were coming apart. On the UZ series engines, or really all engines in that time period, now they're old. The newest one is almost 20 years old. So they love to get very brittle and they start leaking oil in the spark plug. Unlike newer engines, which they have other reasons to do that, but this is the only reason a UZ would do that, for example. Many ways to do those. Always install original ones. I've seen so many aftermarket ones leak from day one because they fall off. They kind of fall down on the tube and they don't even sit right. So always install these original. If I'm not mistaken, they're like $5 each. So adds up, yes, but still, they're worth it. You replace them once, you won't have issues. Same thing with the gaskets. Folks, when it comes to Toyota and Lexus, still even in 2025 model years, always use original gaskets. They're the best. I really, there hasn't been one aftermarket gasket that I would say this is better. I would always use original gaskets. In this particular case, we're using all original parts, so that's one thing. Half moon's very important. That's the part in the back. Here goes that valve cover. I love how it turned out because this car came originally from Miami, so it doesn't have like oxidation on the aluminum. So a quick clean with the Vixen, it just looks beautiful. I'm really happy with how this engine turned out. Although after we are done with everything, there's a million covers and you won't be able to see it, but I know it's clean, and that makes me happy. Let's put it this way. Here I kind of forgot to replace the spark plugs, so yeah, we're not going to do all this work and keep the old spark plugs, although they were not that old. They actually looked pretty good, but still, we went all out on this. Let's fully service it with this engine. It's not going to need any service anytime soon. We're actually a sneak peek from the future. It's approaching its first oil change after this whole work. So this is the part that is a little strange on the UZ. You have these two plates, and of course I always forget to install the second one first before the stud. But a little bit strange, that plate, how it sits. And then this whole gear contraption here, which has super low torque, which almost makes me nervous. I think it was 7 foot-pounds. Don't quote me on this. Always look your specifications. But I think it was 7. It was like you could really hold it with your hand. It's almost nerve-wracking. That's what the timing belt rides on, which is pretty interesting. That's the power steering bracket. This is where I started going on the outside there. I remembered, wait a second, I haven't even done the other side. So here's the other side. It's exactly the same thing, so I figured I'll just kind of run through it. You guys will get the idea. Then we move to the intake manifold. So you might be wondering, what's with the intake manifold? Well, LS430 has the 3UZ has a aluminum intake manifold, which means there are two halves. There's a gasket in between. But first, I wanted to pull the injectors. The thing is, I am going after this car for seals and anything rubber because this came from a very hot zone. So in our area, Chicagoland area, we're in Homer Glen, Illinois, by the way, if you're wondering, that's where our shop is. We have rust problems. In the southern states or warmer climate areas where you don't have salt, you don't have snow, you don't have cold weather, you have different problems. You have everything rubber just dries up and completely just becomes a rock. So it was important to me that we go through every single seal and gasket, because Illinois cars, like in my area, you pull a 20-year-old injector, the O-rings and seals are still pliable, they're still perfectly fine. That's something with cars in our area, but there'll be a rusty mess. That's unfortunately a trade-off for that. But I decided to replace every single injector. And some note on injectors: if you're ever doing injectors on a Toyota, probably other brands, but I'm just gonna stick to Toyota. If you want the best lubrication to install these, because some of these O-rings, when you install them, they're like really hard to push and you worry about rolling them or damaging them, use engine oil. And the same advice goes for direct injectors, especially for Toyota. Put like the Teflon seal and all that sealed, put engine oil flat out. Some folks will disagree, but I've never had a single issue and it works so well. Injector seals go right in. They don't give you a fight. None of the O-rings roll on you or do all kinds of weird stuff. Everything goes very smoothly and we're good. So this is a V8, of course, has two sides. For some reason, two injectors have a black sleeve, two injectors don't. I guess the ones with the black sleeve are the special ones. But yeah, they should be exactly the same for injectors, which that's how they designed it. I mean, the rail on this, I just gotta say, it has a giant metal pipe with the dampers. It's yeah. I guess at this point you guys know that the UZ series engine is the best V8 ever made. Sorry, Chevy 350 guys, we're gonna upgrade it. It's not only the best Toyota V8 engine made, I think it's the best V8 ever made. It's not meant for performance, it's not really very fast, doesn't produce an enormous amount of power, but reliability wise and how basic it is. I mean, I know this doesn't look like a basic engine, but folks, in the engine world, that is a basic engine. That is a very basic engine, and it's a beautiful engine to work on, and it's very well made. I mean, right now it's old, but that's really the only stuff that you're getting with it, like seals and gaskets that leak. But maintain it well, you're not going to have other issues with it. So here's that intake manifold. I'm taking some of these old dry hoses. So intake manifold is a two-piece on this car, and that doesn't have a gasket, although it's a metal gasket, and really you'll see it here in a moment when we pull it. It's perfectly fine. Here it is, but I figured we have it in the gasket kit, gave an intake a really good clean, and you see that long short runner deal. It's pretty interesting how that works, but that's basically why the manifold has this shape, folks. It can shorten the distance for the air to go into the engine, or it can lengthen it. That's what that is, long short runner intake. That's why the intake is massive and has all these turns and whatnot. That's how that looks like. Part of the plan was replacing every single coolant hose. Well, we did that except that one hose on the throttle body. So it was not available initially. Then they said it's discontinued. Then they said, well, it's going to come back. Well, no, they kept going back for it. Then we were assembling the engine. I'm like, you know what? I can always drain the coolant later and replace it once we get it. And as of today, we have not gotten it. I don't think we will ever get it. That's the problem. So clean the throttle body. This is the best. If you have the throttle body out in any car, really spend the time and clean it very well, because that's the best opportunity. In my opinion, throttle bodies are best cleaned from the back. Like, you pull them out, place a gasket, clean them from the back. It'll clean up so well, because that's when you can access everything, and then you'll get a perfectly clean throttle body like new. And that's what we did here. Then we're gonna install the throttle body. Everything is ready. So that pipe at the back of the intake manifold, that pipe is a fuel pipe that connects both sides, and it has a fuel damper on it just to kind of absorb some of the vibrations of the fuel pump, if you would, to kind of make a steady supply in case there's ever a bump up or bump down. And of course, the starter, we have to talk about the starter nightmare. Pretty easy to do right now, but not when it's in the car. It's a pretty tight starter to replace. Of course, we're going to put a new one here. Knock sensors, I didn't really see the need to do anything with the knock sensors because they work. Wire is decent. It's not perfect, but it's decent. Then there's these crossover pipes. These crossover pipes, when you do a starter, if you're ever stuck, especially on an LS430, it's pretty tight area in the back. I would remove that to do the starter. It'll make your life easier. Case of like a GX Tundra Sequoia that has secondary air injection, you have the valves. They actually bolt onto it. It's a pretty strange design. You have to remove it, which is, yeah. You can, in some models, get away without removing it, but the LS430, I would remove it. It'll make your life much easier. So here we're installing that intake manifold. And if I am not mistaken, the gaskets from both sides are the same on the intake manifold of this engine. And the intake manifold is very heavy. That's why you notice two people carried it, because this is not a plastic intake manifold. That's, folks, why they're moving to plastic intake manifolds. Why do we need this aluminum hunk that just super heavy, has so much weight, and it's really, the plastic ones hold perfectly fine. And at least in Toyota land, we don't have issues with plastic intake manifolds, so they hold pretty good. We don't have any issues. Well, isn't it started to look like an engine? I'm so excited. I feel like I don't even remember the details of the day we were filming this, because this was so long ago, I have to admit. But we got it. This series, folks, I'm going to make this announcement right now. And since the car is completed, you're going to see very regular updates on this series, because we're on a deadline, December 17th in real life. Well, maybe the video will come out a little bit later than that. Has to be completed because we have a specific purpose for it. So here, the wire harness. This is, I really tried, folks. I tried for that wire harness. I tried to find a wire harness, not available in the US, not available in Japan. Well, Japan would have a different harness. It's just, I decided I make as they like to say, I made an executive decision. I decided let's go with this harness because really the biggest damage to it is connectors. And actually replaced some of the connectors, cleaned up a little bit. I think we're okay, and so far so good. You know, we don't have issues with it so far. But I decided to keep the harness, replace connectors. Wish me luck, hope for the best. Actually, some of you, when we talked initially about the harness, which I really appreciate, reached out and says, you know, we can find you a used one, we can find one in the junkyard, send it your way. I really appreciate it, but I feel like we are looking at a 20-year-old car. Whichever one you pull out of a used car, out of a junkyard, out of whatnot, it's not going to be too different than the one we have already. So that's the realization I arrived to. If we're not going to buy a brand new one, might as well save the one we have, because anyone you buy is going to be the same. That's the problem with that. Here's an interesting thing. These that what I'm installing right now are the oil control valves. The gaskets for them, or the O-ring, does not come with a master gasket set for this engine. How about that? That's Toyota for you. And that's always the case. So they consider that as a separate component. So they deem that the gasket for it is not part of the engine itself. Here I got slightly carried away and I forgot that we don't have a timing belt. Heck, I did everything at the top and we're like, all right, we're almost done. And I looked down like, oh, what about the rest of the engine? So crank seals going in right now. It's much easier to install it when the oil pump is there already. We got all, so this is, some will say this is not technically not an original part, and I get it, doesn't come in a Toyota box. We used an ASIN timing kit, folks. ASIN, good company, good stuff. Basically, the stuff they use is the same original stuff. Like the tensioner is made by NTN, the pulleys are made by Koyo. This is what the OEM stuff is from the factory. Timing belt. We cannot talk UZ engine without talking about timing belt, folks. This is what destroys this engine. This is the #1 destroyer of this engine that otherwise would run easily for 1,000,000 miles. It'll leak its heart out, but it'll never quit, except when the timing belt breaks. And I see this all the time. We just had an LS430 today, 253,000 miles, original timing belt. It was cracked and half of it was missing. It's still running though, pretty tough, but don't push it. You have a UZ, you don't know where the timing belt was done. If you just bought it, just replace it. Even if it was done a month ago and you didn't know before you bought it, it's not a bad idea, because timing belt breaks, it immediately wipes out valves, and that's the end of that. That's the end of that engine. It doesn't even make sense to pull it out and repair it. Just replace the engine, because they have a very bad habit of the valve contacting the piston so much, and when it bends, it just gouges the cylinder wall, and then it starts burning oil, it starts ticking, and I wouldn't advise it. That's all I'm going to tell you. Some of these connectors here, like there's these clips, and I've been experimenting with some different methods. We found these zip ties that they have a clip at the bottom and it's a zip tie. So you see we're using them here. They're a lifesaver for cars like this, because now we can secure wire harnesses in the OEM location and it works. I really appreciative of that design of zip tie. So here we're finishing up at this point, kind of the race to the finish, just typical timing belt stuff. You know, we got new idler, the big idler, new belt tensioner. We're actually going to install the alternator here shortly. These covers, we gave them a quick clean with the Vixen. They look amazing. I'm really happy with how this engine turned out on the aesthetics department too. There's a new alternator. I figured alternator was covered with oil. I'm like, you know what? We went all this far. Let's put a new alternator. I don't want to mess about. I was also planning to put a new compressor, but then when I found out the price and I forgot that this is not a clutch compressor, it's a variable. Yeah, the old compressor will do. If you ever have to replace a compressor on a facelift LS430, they are not cheap. And in their defense, though, they're not common to have issues, but yeah, they're not cheap, let's put it this way. So this part is an interesting one. These are seals that sit on the bolts that hold the main rod caps on the side. They actually, we have seen a few cases where they leak, and they manifest as a upper oil pan leak, but they're those seals. And I wanted to use every single gasket and seal in this kit, and that's what we did. So that was one of the last things before we installed the last few things, and this engine is done. For you, some of you may have completely forgotten about this car, and I do apologize. It's been so long since we've worked on this car that some folks will just completely forgot about it. If you are a new viewer, sorry. Maybe catch up on this series, because this has started out as I feel bad for this car that I neglected it, but now things have changed dramatically. That car became a kind of a passion and a very important car in our family. So, well, more on that later in the series, but this was a very happy moment, because it's like, wow, we actually are finishing this project, and we are going, because there's something, small rant. I see, we all watch YouTube. We all, love cars and always checking out cool cars and other projects. There are some, God bless them, and probably for good reason. There are some that start projects and never finish them. It seems like either it's an eternal project, or just keep going and going and going until folks lose interest and there's no more views, and they just cancel and move on. Some of them finish their projects completely. I like to finish my project, because you're working on a car, folks are following along. They want to see the final result. They don't want to just, it's like you're watching a series on TV and they release the first season and the next season comes in 15 years later. Well, what is this show? You completely forgot about it. It's almost like you have to go watch the beginning. I do have a confession to make. I feel like I did do that to you guys in this particular series right now. It's ironic that I'm saying this, but we are fully committed, folks. This is it. For the following few Saturdays, you will see the complete series to its completion. You will see this car done. We will do the final things to it, and you will see the final result, which I think you will be very happy with, because I'm extremely happy with it, especially for the change of plans. But exhaust manifolds. Exhaust manifolds on these, just like the trucks, they can actually develop ticking sounds. They have cracks and whatnot. Not as common as the trucks, but it is very possible, folks. If you also develop a ticking noise that when the engine is cold, it'll tick, but when it fully warms up, it goes away, I would look at exhaust manifolds. They're difficult to diagnose because it's such a cramped engine bay here, especially in the LS430, but it's possible. So don't rule that out. So here we're installing kind of the final stuff, including the coolant hoses. So I got all new coolant hoses except the one in the throttle body, which thank you, Lexus, for that. Every single rubber part on this engine, except the harness, unfortunately, that we were not able to get. I tried to replace just because I don't want to deal with problems with this car. Because we went this far, and the only non-shiny thing on this engine is the wire harness and the compressor, but I can live with that. So here, this is the strange pipe, just has such an over-engineered pipe. I love it. It doesn't get in the way or anything, but just it's a little contraption, folks. Once more, I'd like to reiterate my admiration for the design of this engine. But nothing is perfect in life, and I gotta say that O-ring on the rear main seal cover and then the oil pump in the front, not the greatest idea, in the starter location, not the greatest idea, although there are worse in Toyota land, but that's that's one of their Achilles heels, I suppose. And the timing belt. Well, the timing belt's maintenance. You maintain it. Take care of your car, I'll take care of you type deal. So there's that. Now we're going to switch gears and look at something very, very different that you haven't potentially seen before. I decided, it's kind of an executive decision, let's take a risk, because I could not get the shaft of this. This is a power steering pump. It's not a rebuild kit, it's like a seal kit for it. Figured, you know what, we're here. I don't want leaks. I don't like leaks in cars. So let's pull it apart, Yeah, if you've ever seen inside of a power steering pump, let's pull it apart, refresh all the seals, take a look at everything. Actually, this pump looked great on the inside. You'll see the veins. That's why it's called a vein pump. So pretty simple job, but you got to be careful with a few things. You got to be careful with like the orientation of the rotor, the orientation of the direction of the veins themselves. They are directional. You got to install them right, otherwise this pump will tear itself apart in minutes. That's one thing important. Looking at the inside of this pump, it's not really discolored, dirty, or it's actually pretty clean for a pump that has 165,000 miles. That's nearly 20 years old. Toyota does not have power steering pump problems. That's one thing. Leaks, yeah, but power steering pump going out, I mean, even if you run it low on fluid, and they'll still keep going and going and going. Doing this this power steering pump, though, I do have to say a word of warning. You gotta follow direction. You gotta have the manual, because some of these O-rings, the location and the way the pump is built, the only thing I did not like about it, which I feel like this may be an issue in the future, where the seal in the front and the shaft, it had a pretty gnarly groove. I don't know if it's going to hold long term, but this pump, meaning it was going to leak regardless. I tried to push the seal a little bit further in just to maybe start sealing on a new surface, but have a feeling this may leak in the future, and maybe we should have replaced it. But I figured, we put all this work, simple enough to replace later. Let's just go with it, hope it holds. So wish us luck on that one. I'll keep you posted. We'll probably, after the series wraps, I'll give you an update on a milestone or something, which we're coming up on a 600,000 mile Lexus update here. I'll give you an update on that one. But yeah, that was an interesting kind of detour. Let's reseal the power steering pump. It was actually not a bad job. The seal kit was like $36, $30-something. Let's put it this way. It was not a bad kit. And they're available. I've seen them now. Multiple cars we've done this to. It's like, this is available, and it's fresh as the pump, and we don't have any issues with it. Not a bad idea. Lace some 20, because some of the O-rings we pulled out of it, they were basically rocks. Let's put it this way. But that pump is good. I'm happy with it, and that's pretty much the last thing we have on this engine, and it's completely assembled, folks, after months. I can't believe I'm rewatching these, because we have a lot coming up in this series, and once the mechanical stuff wraps, there's a lot going on. Folks, this is the final component going in the engine. After that, we're going to put the drive bolt, and that's pretty much a wrap. Let's finish that, and let's go talk about this live. Finally, the engine is done. This probably, as we talked about, has been the longest video we've ever made on this channel, simply because we're a little busy. That's the problem. That's what delayed this. But it's ready. It's finally ready to go. Isn't it looking beautiful? I'm really happy with it. So the wire harness, unfortunately, that is one thing that we'll continue looking for solutions, because we can replace every single connector. I feel like we may revisit this sometime in the future. For now, I think it'll hold. It will be okay. Here's the plan for the next episode. We have to get this engine back into the car, but first we actually have to prepare some things in the car itself, then get this engine in. I just have to say one thing, and it has been a minute. We are very familiar with LS 430s, but it's been a minute. So the minute is not going to be figuring out where things go. We know that part, but where are things? That's what we're having problems with. Folks, thank you so much for joining us in the longest video we've ever made on the channel in real life to film it, because it's been months. Let's put it this way. But it's done, and thank you so much for joining us so far. If you are just tuning in and you have no idea what the car we're talking about is, I'll leave that series right here. This is the most neglected car that I own. It's my fault. Definitely. It's even worse now. Working on that. Folks, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was informative. Until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.